So before I do fully dive into this video, I do want to put out there that this is not a slant on any of the wrestlers, any of the talent who are involved in all of these storylines. I think this is solely to do with the bookers, because all the wrestlers are incredibly talented. I just don't think they're getting given the material that they should be. So yeah, in short, wrestlers, you're awesome. Bookers, do better. Hello and welcome to FTTR, I am Hugh McQuaid, and today we are talking about a sort of general overview of mainstream women's wrestling and how I think it feels like we've taken a step backwards from where we were a few years ago, and how that is not a good thing. Obviously, it's not. Before we dive into this, please hit subscribe, please like this video, please comment your thoughts down below, and I'll try and apply to every single one of them, because I think this is a hot issue to talk about, and I feel like it's been building. It's reached a point now where I'm seeing things happen in AEW and WWE. They're the two promotions that we're going to be talking about today, and I'm like, this just isn't good enough for 2024. Like, what are we doing here? Now, asterisks on all of this. This is coming from a middle-aged white guy with a beard, no hair, and a baseball cap. So take for that what you will. But my analysis of this is that it's just not good enough. Like, in terms of what the women's wrestlers are getting given, it pales in comparison to the depth and intricacies that the men are getting in both AEW and WWE. I think there's so much more thought that seems to be put into men's feuds, men's matches, when really it should all be equal. Like, it should all be equal. I don't understand why we're not getting sort of like big takeover stories with the women's division in AEW, for example, or we're not getting the same character interactions that we would for the Bloodline with the women's War Games match. It's like, this is not, something's not matching up here, and I don't understand how we got here, because obviously you look at where, so this is pre-AEW, you look at where women's wrestling was back then, and you sort of had, obviously you had the women's Evolution, Revolution, whatever you want to call it, back in 2017, 2016, when all that sort of, that hashtag got going. You had the Four Horsewomen and everything like that, and it seemed like with the rise of Becky Lynch, with the rise of the Four Horsewomen, Ronda Rousey coming in, there was a lot of focus put on that women's division, particularly that year stretch that Ronda Rousey's first year was. You had the Evolution PPV, you had the main event of WrestleMania, the first women's main event of WrestleMania, and from there it sort of looked like we were on the up. You had Bianca Belair coming in, you had Rhea Ripley coming in, you had Triple H doing an excellent job of booking the women in NXT, and seemingly when he took over creative for the main roster, I think we all thought, okay, we're going to get the same kind of shine on these underappreciated divisions, like tag team wrestling, like women's wrestling, and that's not happened in WWE. I think tag team wrestling is basically where it was, back when he took over, and women's wrestling, I think, has taken a step backwards, because if you look at, I did some statistics, people. What was the last women's main event of a pay-per-view? Correct. You said Rhea Ripley versus Nia Jax from Elimination Chamber this year. Okay, they've had one main event this year. Before that, when was the last women's main event of a pay-per-view? I'll give you a few minutes. You're probably correct. It was Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair at WrestleMania, and I was racking my head like, surely there was a women's main event in between here somewhere. There had to have been. No. Those were the last two women's main events. That is not good enough in the slightest. I don't give a damn if you're Roman Reigns, if you're Bloodline. I don't give a damn Like, sometimes you've had matches that shouldn't have main evented. Simple as. Absolutely simple as. There have been many a times, if you look through the calendar, the pay-per-view calendar in that time frame, and look at when women could have main evented a show, you'd be able to pick like, probably like 10 at this rate, because they were probably main evented by bloodline stuff. And that begs the question, why aren't the women's division getting that kind of treatment? Why aren't they getting this big, grand soap opera story? Because the soap opera story that we're being presented with was two women fighting over a man. And that was Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan over Dominic Mysterio. The title taking a back seat. Is that really what we're getting? Like, seriously? You've got, like, Sopranos with wrestling, with the bloodline, and then you've got EastEnders level of love triangle. It's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And I don't think the argument of main events don't matter. I think in this fandom, in wrestling fandom, I think main events do matter. And I think when women or tag teams main event, it makes them feel like they're at the same level as the men, because the men always get the spotlight. They always get the big singles matches. They always get the big stories. Like the introduction of the US title for the women's, I think that's an interesting idea, but I don't have faith that it's going to be pulled off particularly well. Like, sure, introducing another belt, but you're not treating the women's tag belts with any kind of respect or dignity either. So I just feel like, particularly in WWE, we will get to AEW in just a moment. In WWE, it feels like they have no excuse. Like, there's no excuse anyway, but there's no excuse they shouldn't be doing better. They have, like, they're going to be having 3-hour shows. They have pay-per-views that are 4 hours with a load of adverts with only 5 matches. Like, you've got no excuse, really. No excuse. You have no excuse to have booked the Women's War Games match this poorly, because I think it has been booked poorly. You look at Liv suddenly siding with Nia for no reason whatsoever after they were just feuding at Crown Jewel. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Whereas with men, we've got Sammy getting recruited in, we've got Jimmy bringing Jay in, you've got all these complex things, Solo trying to recruit Sammy, you've got all these different cogs spinning, whereas they've just done it for the sake of doing it for the women, and that's not good enough. It's really not good enough. It's an easy fix. Just give them more attention. Just give the women more attention. Give the tag teams. I could do a whole video on tag teams not getting the right amount of appreciation as well. But I think in terms of the mainstream perception of women's wrestling, it was really, really good. Becky Lynch was like an icon. She was the most popular person in that entire company. And now you look at sort of the landscape of top female wrestlers, you've got like Rhea Ripley. That's about it. I don't think any of them were at that point where they were outselling like Roman, outselling Seth. That's what Becky Lynch was doing, and it was awesome. We've also not got an Evolution 2, which again makes no sense. So rant aside there, it's an easy fix. You just do better. Do better, okay? Book better stories. Give them more time. Let them have the best matches on the card. And there you have it. Switching sides over to AEW. AEW, let's be honest, have never treated their women as well as the men. Ever. Like, from day one, AEW has not put as much shine or spotlight on women's wrestling as they should. It is egregious how little they've done. Usually one match per show, some backstage segments. Like, the matches are usually really good. Like the Mariah May Anna Jay from Collision was really good. But why has Mariah May not got a match set up for Full Gear, which is next weekend? That's your women's champion. That's your top female champion. And she's not got a match set for Full Gear. Like, why? You could argue they're waiting for Toni Storm, they're waiting for Mina Shirakawa to come in. But it's not good enough. It's absolutely not good enough when you've got Moxley tearing everything down and having this long story from like All In, All Out, through to Full Gear, through Wrestle Dream. You've had Moxley sort of building this faction. You've got Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher drawing on their history. You've got Takeshita versus Ricochet, which has been set up quite nicely with the Don Callis family. You've got all these stories going into Full Gear, but the women's feuds have not had that. The only one that's had a little bit of spotlight is Mercedes versus Chris Statlander, which hasn't been that great because we just turned Chris Statlander for no reason, because we needed her for this match. There was no story justification for it. She just did. And that's unacceptable. Unacceptable to give them this little sort of, give them this little spotlight. And the main sort of thing that really rubs me the wrong way with AEW's presentation of the women comes from, and you can see it on the thumbnail, Ring of Honor. Why have we got Chris Jericho with the ROH title and Mark Briscoe to an extent, and the ROH title in general to an extent, all over AEW Dynamite, the flagship show for AEW, yet Athena has not made... When was the last time Athena appeared on Dynamite? I couldn't tell you. I actually couldn't tell you when the Women's World Champion was on Dynamite. Like, why is she not having the same presentation as Chris Jericho? Having promos, promoting Ring of Honor. Why is she not there? She's probably the best women's wrestler that they have under the AEW umbrella, and to not have her featured on the show when the men's title is all over the show just properly rubs me the wrong way. It feels icky. Like, this is why they're not being presented the same way. They are world titles. They should be presented the same way. We should have like Athena having a ladder war with Camille or something like that. Like, give them some spotlight. And I'm gonna be honest, don't watch Ring of Honor, but I love Athena. I watch her pay-per-view matches. They're awesome. Her match with Billy Starks, one of my favourite matches of last year. But she's not getting the same spotlight as any of the guys had when they had the ROH title. When MJF and Adam Cole had the ROH tag titles, they were on Dynamite. Why is Athena not there with Billy Starks? It's proper bad stuff. And it does really, really rub me the wrong way. And I feel like they can just do better. AEW has a lot of programming, a lot of time. And they have long pay-per-views. Like, the matches on pay-per-views are always really good. But the builds for them, barring Mariah May vs. Toni Storm, which was awesome, have never been good. I can't think of a build going into a women's match in an AEW pay-per-view that I would be like, that is must watch. That has made me so hyped for this match, other than Toni Storm versus Mariah May. And it's not good enough. I think we're reaching like a breaking point with this, because I've seen people online sort of saying the same thing, and I wanted to get it out there. Again, no slant on the wrestlers, but the bookers need to be doing better at this point, because you can go to your independent promotions and you're getting a lot of spotlight on female wrestlers, like an unbelievable amount. We just had Rio versus Lizzie Evo, main event of Progress show for the women's title. Like, it happens quite a lot in independent wrestling, but for some reason the two big corporations don't seem to want to do that. Like, you've noticed I've not mentioned TNA, because I think TNA do a good job. Japan, they have their own promotions. They have Stardom, they have Sendai Girls, they have Tokyo Joshi Pro, where they do highlight women really, really well. We just got a new GHC women's champion in Noah. Like, they're doing all really, really well. And the one that needs to be shouted out, and this is why it's so weird, because it falls under the same umbrella, is NXT. How on earth is NXT under the same umbrella, putting out probably the best women's wrestling, arguably on the planet? you could go there. You've got Stephanie Vaquer, Julia, Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade. You've got so many talented women in NXT. And yet, that is just miles above what the main roster is putting out. Like NXT, if you want to watch great North American women's wrestling, you have to watch NXT because they put time and care into their stories. Like Roxanne's reign's been really, really good. Like, how is that possible? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. We were saying this about NXT and main roster when Triple H was running it and Vince is running it. They fall under the same umbrella. Why are they not unified in that regard? It's happening again with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, but you wouldn't think it would happen, but it is. And the landscape is just, it's a bit of it's a sad time if you are into women's wrestling and want to see it like get the spotlight it deserves. I'm still waiting for an AEW pay-per-view to be main evented by the women. I think you could have argued that Mariah May versus Toni Storm could have been the main event of Wembley, but they've not built enough stories to sort of be a credible main event. So where do we go from here? They both just need to do better, really. Both companies just need to do better. It's on the thumbnail. Just do better and book the women better. It shouldn't be as hard as you're making it out to be. And that wraps up my little rant. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you not? Let me know and I'll try to apply to every single one of them. Thank you all ever so much for your support and have a nice day.